Welcome to the podcast for product engineers.
Okay. So, welcome everyone to another episode of the ePilot Product Engineer podcast. So I'm here today with my colleague Josh. I'm João Pinho. I'll start by presenting myself. So I'm been a principal engineer on ePilot for roughly 4 years. I'm currently working on Team Sigma. So Team Sigma is all about user efficiency and helping our users get super productive on their daily tasks. I'm mostly involved these days with our messaging foundation on the platform, and also the way users delete data. So everything that touched data deletion and kind of going into the data compliance and GDPR part of it. And yeah, that's pretty much about the things I'm currently focused on. Then I'll give a chance to my colleague Josh to present himself. So
So Josh, and I'm actually Australian, based out of Poland, and I've been a product engineer for ePilot for about 4 months now. So still relatively new, but been in many different roles over the years, primarily product startups. Currently at ePilot, I'm on Team Mosaic, where we're sort of like working to deliver solutions to our end customers. So it's kind of like the customers of our customers, if you can think of it like that.
Yeah.
And my focus is right now is primarily on delivering solutions for like helping commodity and utility providers better engage their end customers. Think of it like, you've got a new tariff, or you've got like a cross-selling products. You can sort of use ePilot to facilitate that.
That's good. That's very good. Thanks for sharing. So today we will be unpacking what it really means for engineers to think beyond code. So more towards the product, the customer, and the business, and the way we plan to introduce this. So that is structured for everyone that is listening. Is we'll start by going through to two leading questions, and in that sense, what I would like to start unpacking here is like, what does it mean for engineers to have a product and customer mindset?
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded question, but I think I can break it down into like 3 parts. I think it starts with having a outcome over output approach, right? So recognizing that the code that we create, it's not the end goal, right? It's the end goal is delivering that value to the customer. And it's also having empathy and curiosity for the user. So who are the users, and sort of like what are their struggles, and how are they interacting with our products? And I think it's also challenging assumptions and collaborating with upstream. It's basically meaning not to be just a spectator, but to be the one that can be empowered to work together in a product environment and sort of like suggest better ways of solving a particular problem for the customer.
Yeah, 100%. And you actually said one word there that I can correlate a lot with, and I would like you to expand on that, which is empathy. And so I'll throw it back to you. Like, how do you cultivate empathy when engineers are not customer facing or so exposed to customers? Because as you know, like here on ePilot, it's perhaps one of those examples, although this is something we try to mitigate the most we can by involving engineers directly with customers sometimes. It's still quite hard at times to actually reach the customer or talk directly with the customer.
Yeah, that's true. Most engineers don't have direct involvement with customers day to day. I think it starts by creating those opportunities for engineers to be exposed to that customer context. And, that can be in one of many ways. think of it like we've got customer feedback, right? Like how do we get that into the hands of our engineers earlier in the process? Like getting engineers to participate in things like user testing and research sessions and that general cross-functional collaboration with customer-facing teams. One example from a prior role, a prior company that I worked for, we had an initiative where engineers on rotation would sort of spend a day in the life of a customer support engineer. They would sort of work hand in hand with customer support and sort of be the front line for the business in a way, like responding to customer queries and sort of resolving tickets. But part of that experience, like the engineers got to see firsthand, like what customers were experiencing, what their struggles were, and they were able to build that customer empathy through that process. And then finally, I think it's like, keeping the customer at the center of the conversation. Like a lot of times from what I've observed is like it starts at a leadership level, right? But it fails to expand further than that. And I think like it's whatever we do in the product development life cycle, it's keeping that customer at the center. And yeah, I touched on the cultural aspect a little bit, but it does mean that as leaders and product managers, we need to lead by example in that area as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like 100% agree with what you are saying, and that's actually one of the positive shifts I have been noticing a lot from the work we have been doing the past years, which is precisely try to kind of stimulate the engineers to actually, or create opportunities for them to interact with customers, ask them to act like owners, and that's what the act like owners is all about. Is like, assume this is your product, take it as yours, lead with empathy, see opportunities to engage with customers, talk with your PM, get involved, and build great products.
Yeah, I think like I'd like to follow that up with another question for you, Joao. Like, how did you carry that mindset into a product company? Like the whole shift in focus to being around the customer and the product.
Yeah, so in my case, it's kind of I would like to go a little bit back before explaining where do I come from. So most of my time, perhaps because I was a working student, I work mostly at consultancy companies, and I kind of did the opposite of what product companies do, because I worked in many consultancy companies and I was most of the times working on a specific project. And what I learned with that is that I always had to go after what are the specs, what are the pains, what are the needs. Sometimes would have a scope, but that scope would change, and I would have to go and find my answers. And as I got more and more experience on consultancy, at some point what I felt is that I was always creating these products, but they were never my own. And I would only build them to a certain point. And then they would be taken away by the product teams in-house of those companies, and I would just move away to another product. And this is actually one of the reasons why I joined a product company. It's because I feel the need to be connected with the product I'm building, connected with my users. For me, it's not just like build, get it set up and go. It's more like I like to be connected with the product, understand what I'm building, see the next steps. So kind of being able to build on something.
Yeah, it's like so important, because like it's like understanding the outcomes is one thing, right? But then also understanding like how do we get to that outcome in the first place, and being able to feel it as well, and like being able to sort of know how you can connect your work that you do to that outcome, I think is super important. I do have to say, I do have one more question. Like, was it hard to stop thinking in scopes and then start thinking in, like the product loop?
A little bit, because one thing that projects do really well, or mostly try to do is, typically the scope is more or less clear. The customer knows what he wants when he calls us in, and we are expected to deliver on X time. And that's a problem with projects, because oftentimes it gets a fixed scope and a fixed deadline, and then both don't combine well together. But then when we go to product companies, what you see oftentimes is, okay, there is some sort of scope, like there is a roadmap, but the definition of time, it's not so clear, because typically the product teams are not project teams, so they are different teams. And when the product team is building, this definition of when it needs to be ready or done, sometimes it's a bit blurry, not so well defined. And the fact that we don't have that pressure sometimes creates this thing that, okay, let's build this feature because it looks good and cool, and let's ship it and evaluate, but we miss the connection with sometimes with the actual customer. What is the most important thing that needs to be done? Why is this feature being done before some other feature? What is the priority? And so it's really easy to get that done wrongly.
Yeah,
right?
And you end up starting to build things just for the sake of it rather than
exactly
for purpose. You know what I mean?
And exactly that. And we all know that when we are building a product in a company, obviously our own valuation in the company, what we show, what we demo, what we do, it also matters. And sometimes it's very easy to fall into the trap of, I'm building this, but are you building that for yourself and to show all of this that you are building, or are you building this because your users actually need that? And it's very important to be grounded in that sense, have metrics, and being able to support, let's say, even your product manager, being able to support him with metrics where you can even advise him like, hey, I've been measuring our feature adoption and I'm seeing these patterns. I'm seeing that users are perhaps not using this feature so much. Maybe we should double down on something else, or maybe we should do a different kind of validation with them to understand why they are not adopting. And this is connected with something that I often say, like, you don't start, like, the feature is not done when we release it. That's just when it starts, right? Because after that, you have to do all the work of, is it being adopted or not? Why is it not being adopted? Should you take a step back and remove the feature because, after all, you delivered the wrong thing? So that's literally when it starts. And that's another pitfall in which many times we see teams that they actually ship it and then they feel like, oh, it's done. But no, it just started.
Yeah. No, I've experienced that firsthand. And like the one thing I've learnt through my years of experience as a product engineer, right, is like, I really appreciate like how the role has been shaped over the years, and that, you know, the responsibility of an engineer has expanded much further than just being a coder. And now I see engineers like being part of the full product development lifecycle, right? Yeah. And to your point, I think like, yeah, you've got obviously the stages of, you know, discovery and research, and then you go through that implementation phase, right? But then, you know, what happens next? Like, how do you take it further than that? Like that, you talk about adoption, right? Like, what are the things that engineers could be doing in the adoption phase?
Yeah, like there are many, and I don't want to overextend this and bore our listeners to that. But one thing that I would like to share, and perhaps doing a little bit of sponsoring to Datadog, is that this week I was just completely vibing with one feature that they just launched, which is called Product and Analytics. And it's just great that just the fact that we have Datadog real-time user monitoring set up in our product, it captures a bunch of stuff for us, like page views. You can define funnels based on pathways, like users go through our feature and they enter on a given route and then navigate to another route, which also forces us to build a good routing on the platform so we can actually see how they are drilling down through the feature. And then on top of that, we can actually record actions with more metadata, which you can use to filter and create these funnels by steps. And honestly, this is great because lets us like have literally all the information we need and we can start even tracking like how many times users are clicking this button and facing an error, how many times they are staying on a screen kind of blocked until they go to the next step. And obviously these qualitative data is important because we can observe like user sessions, but that's also super lengthy. Something that we do often, but it takes a lot of time. And so if we have a way to really gauge these on a dashboard and see more or less whether we are getting adoption or not through this dashboard, it helps us a lot. And this is something that I just recently started exploring as an example.
No, that's super awesome. Look, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and perhaps like start to talk a bit more about business outcomes.
Yeah.
I have a view on this itself, like why it's an imperative thing for engineers to be focused on business outcomes. Like, I guess I can start like by saying, like, my initial thinking about this is that engineering work is an investment, right? Like, we write great code, but that's not the end goal. It has a cost up front.
Yeah.
And like if it's not creating, if it's not moving that needle for the business,
True.
then it's not valuable, right? And it's only valuable when delivering real impact for the business. And like the business context is super important as well, because like, how do we create that value, right? Like, we need to have a certain understanding about the business and its goals, and also the customer. And by having that understanding, we can sort of like make better, smarter, more informed decisions. And, that's going to basically be the foundation for creating a great product, right? And if we're creating a great product, it means that we're also obtaining or working towards those outcomes. And outcomes are built around the basis that, okay, a business to be sustainable needs to be hitting those outcomes.
Yeah.
It cannot be sustainable without it. And you could have an awesome, snazzy product, right? But it's pointless if the business is not sustainable. So I'm really keen to dive into this a bit more, because I think like it's super important for engineers to at least have a context around.
Let me add to that just that what you just said is super important, because we are seeing the work that product engineers do, or we are seeing the work that software engineers do shift more into this product engineering role. And this directly ties with how we also get evaluated in terms of how are we performing. If you think about the importance of having, as an engineer, to have a good track record, it's shifting from I did this feature, or I delivered X, or something more towards like, I had this impact because I did this, the outcome was that, and I could, let's say, increase the option of the users of this given part of the platform by X. So it's shifting much more towards the impact to have in the business and how much you move the needle than it used to be before, in which like you could just say like, I worked on these things here, but it's like, yeah, that no longer matters, because if you do a lot of work and you don't move the needle, then it kind of you are just saying that track record you have kind of irrelevant. So it's a great observation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've got some pretty good examples that I can talk about here, and I think it would set us up to chat about it a bit more. Like, and I have a really good example of this. Like, from my past, like we were working on a communications platform, and like engineers were like saying, "Oh yeah, we've got the best architecture, and we've got super smart engineers working on this," and we were able to deliver it relatively quickly as well. But there was something missing. Like, we felt like what we were doing, we felt good about the product itself, but not so much about who was going to be using it. And I think on reflection, the key piece that we were missing was understanding, like, what was the desired outcome from what we were building, and what metrics mattered to the business, in this context. And I think we fell into the trap of assuming that, like, oh, okay, yeah, we're testing this thing every day and it works great and we feel good about it, but we weren't the customer,
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
when we actually ended up releasing the product and our customers started playing around with it and the feedback started coming in, what we realized is that they were only using certain parts of the product. And when you looked at what these things were, like, ultimately they could have been off-the-shelf solutions that could have been just plugged into our core platform,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And
Typical.
you reflect back on that, think, well, we wasted 6 months when we could have put something out there in a month, and it could have. And it's the typical buy versus build scenario, right? Where you're at risk of wasting time, money, and energy on these type of decisions if you don't think about outcomes, right? And I think it's super important to make sure that you keep the customer central in these conversations early, so you don't fall into that trap.
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, it's a efficiency game. In the end, it's an efficiency game because you can put a lot of force on it. But if you are not efficient on what matters, then you are just gonna underperform compared to your competitors.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I would say that, in my case in particular, I also like to ground a lot the discussions to the time investment versus money and the business outcomes, because it's very easy, like, as engineers, to get sidetracked into over polishing things that, as you said, if we don't have well present in our minds the KPI that we want to influence. So where do we want to move the needle towards? Do we want to optimize the time the users take to do this action by X%, or do you want to reduce the amount of time a given user spends looking at a given lead and handling its process? So if you don't have clear KPIs that you want to optimize, very easily you can spend 1 week optimizing here a drop down that improves the way that in which you add labels to a given entity or something like that, and then you look at your KPIs and what really matters, and did that effort paid back into what we want to optimize in terms of business? No. Then why are we putting time on that? Obviously there are things like technical debt and so on, but that's another kind of discussion in which, in my personal opinion, we should always do the technical debt when the problem is at hand in the context of what we are trying to optimize in terms of business outcome, and then you do it. Otherwise, you are not just gonna sit for a week and do technical debt because you decide.
Yeah, like that's so important. Like, I have a follow up. Like, do you feel like devs should be regularly reflecting on their priorities and like how they align with these business goals?
Yeah, I think I do agree, because in my opinion, you are the sole responsible person by your own career. And I think as engineers, we should have pride, and we should go after having a great career with an impactful track record. And so if you don't do that, you are basically saying that your career is not under your control. Like somebody, because it's like that saying, either you decide or your career is going to grow, or somebody's going to decide that for you, right? And so like time, either you prioritize your time or somebody's going to prioritize your time for you. And so I think engineers should act not reactively but proactively and think like, okay, I want to have impact, so what are the things I need to do to achieve the business outcomes that I want to achieve? And what are the business outcomes? Good question. So we need to go after the answer. Talk with your CTO, talk with your CEO, talk with your customers, talk with your PM. Go find the answers and understand what do they know that you don't, and understand, what do you know and you can help them get that they don't have, right? So imagine you can have a really, really great PM, but maybe you see that PM is lacking some data. It doesn't have enough information about what's happening on the platform. like qualitatively through the entire user base. But you have access to that. Give them the data. Bring the data. Bring some solutions up front, and then work with them.
Yeah, no, that's so important. Like, the customer context is like crucial to sort of understanding like how these goals come about, right? And a lot of the times it's not easily accessible to the engineers, but that's when I think the responsibility also falls on the business and the different areas of that business to be able to openly share this information, so that like there's a culture around.
Yeah,
like
100%.
Yeah.
And like to summarize all of this, just so we can give the listeners some takeaways, like what would be like one takeaway from you to everybody that is listening to?
Yeah, look, I think like to be I think a great product engineering in general like starts when we stop asking, what should I build? And it starts by asking like, whose problem am I solving, and how will I know I'm succeeding at solving that problem? Like my challenge to everyone, I think, listening is, to stay curious and find one way to connect the work that we do as product engineers to a real customer or business outcome.
Yeah, I think like for me, like through what I do every day and through my grit, I think I have the no excuses mindset. So I think you don't need to be a PM to care about the customer, which is often comes to the talk. You just need to be an engineer that cares about the customer, cares about the business outcome. And then you go after the answers, like with no excuses.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that's a wrap. It has been great.
Thanks, Joao.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening.
You've been listening to the podcast for product engineers. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time.